Hello and welcome to the low budget. Oh, it got out of hand. The low budget review show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is from Saga Press, and this is the first thing I have read by Stephen Graham Jones, I believe. He may have had a short story in an anthology I read, but I don't recall. This is definitely the first novel I've picked up by Mr. Jones. And this is a story of revenge. Four American Indian friends, when they were young, they did something. And 10 years later, that something has come calling. And we'll get more into it. But first of all, recently listened to an episode of the Ghoulish podcast with Max Booth III, a host, and Stephen Graham Jones was the guest. The subject was slashers, and Stephen Graham Jones basically defined a slasher movie as a movie involving revenge. Of course, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger Wants Revenge, Prom Night, Terror Train, Happy Birthday to Me, I believe. He named all of these bunch of different movies. No one talked about the fact that Halloween, I don't think, has anything at all to do with revenge, and that's one of the first slashers out there. But aside from that, all the rest were about revenge, so he calls this a slasher novel. Um, and I can see that, but it is definitely unlike any other slasher story that I'm familiar with. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with a slasher story quite like this. Now the book starts. I think it's. I think the first part is just a year or two after the inciting incident, we'll call it. Um, and after this part, and I'm not going to tell you what happens in this little section. The beginning part is kind of quick. Let me take a quick look and see if it. No, it doesn't say prologue or anything. It just jumps in there. But then as soon as it's over, we get these gray pages. That first part does not have a gray page, so kind of a prologue if you want to look at it that way. But anyway, that takes place, I think, just a year or two after the inciting incident. Once that's over, we jump to those gray pages, uh, and the whole book's not gray. It's just like each book or part has that gray page with the title. Then we jump to the present day, and now we're getting into the story. And eventually, we're going to learn what that incident was from 10 years ago and why this stuff is happening. And we're getting into basically the modern day lives of these Native American friends. I thought about this when I was reading because I knew I was going to review it, and I wasn't sure if the proper thing to say would be Native American, or on the inside flap it says American Indian. They refer to themselves as Indians, but I feel like quite often that was, at least in certain parts, um, it felt like that was in relation to the white man. So it felt almost derogatory. I'm not sure that's correct, but a lot of times I felt that when one of the characters referred to themselves as Indian or thought Indian, it had to do with, oh, I know how these white cops see an Indian. So I wasn't sure that was the way to go, and obviously the title itself comes from a very horrible saying. Uh, but then later in the book, when a couple of our main characters, who I'm going to say are in their mid to late 20s, they're talking to, they're on the reservation, and they're talking to a character that I think is about 16, 16 to 18, and that younger character says, hey, it's not Indian, it's native. And the older characters, our main characters, say, for your generation, it's Native. For us, it's just Indian. So, I don't want to offend anyone. So I'm going to do my best. But it is something I thought about the best way to say it. But anyway, we've got. So again, we're in the present day. We eventually learn about what happened 10 years ago, and we see the consequences of that incident from 10 years ago. Now, after I read this, I looked at some reviews. I'd heard mostly rave reviews, but I did know that there were some lower rated reviews, and I wanted to see what they had to say. And one of the things that seemed to be in the few bad reviews that I looked at was people didn't like Mr. Jones' writing style, and I think those people are crazy. It took me a page or two to get into it, but once I did, I just felt that there was this ebb and flow to the way it was written and the style that Mr. Jones has. And I have a couple of his other books now. I haven't read them, so I don't know if that was specific to this book or if that's just his style in everything he writes. But again, once I got used to it and got into it, I really enjoyed the writing. We get a bunch of different perspectives from different characters, and there's even a second person perspective at one point. Everything else is third person, but there are points where some second person perspective jumps in. I believe that's the proper term when it says you. And I really liked that. I think it worked. As the story goes, as it progresses, we get, I think, a fascinating look into the life of these Native American characters, in some cases off the reservation, living in the white man's world, if you will, and how they live in a world that doesn't always accept them, and that they may not necessarily fit into, even if they're, as much as they try, as much as they might have people who accept them. I think we get to know that they still feel like an outsider, and to me, this is really interesting. And then we do get a look at some of them on the reservation and what that life is like. And there's push and pull between the generations on the reservation, so it's not all milk and cookies there. There's good and bad in both worlds, and I think we see that. And to me, this is all very, very interesting. And as all of this is going on, as we're getting all of this story, holy mackerel, pardon my language, the story slowly builds. We get to know the characters. We get to know their situations. Some odd things are happening, and we get this slow burn. It builds and builds, and then there's just this tremendous crescendo of insanity. Not literally, I don't think. Just it explodes, and then boom, we're back to life, slowly getting to know people, getting to know their situations, slowly building. Some weird things are happening, and then boom, another crescendo. It's just, wow. It is a roller coaster ride of a long, long, long hill, and then a precipitous drop. And then another long, long, long hill and a precipitous drop, and it works amazingly. I was blown away by this book. I think maybe I've made that clear by now. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. As I said, I've already picked up a couple more books by Stephen Graham Jones. Definitely going to get more. He has another one coming out, I believe, later this year that sounds fantastic. I'm going to grab that as soon as it's out. just fantastic. Absolutely. The way he tells the story is great. The characters are fantastic. They're fascinating. Um, Obviously, I'm not familiar with the life of a Native American, whether on or off the reservation. So all of this I found fascinating. Stephen Graham Jones, I believe I read that he is a member of the Blackfeet Nation. I'm 99% sure that's what I said. What I read. And I really hope I'm not wrong. Our four main characters are Blackfeet. There are a couple of Crow characters, and then some of them lame ass white people. um, but again, so the storytelling and the look at these Native Americans, these Blackfeet, and how they live, again on and off the reservation, just for me was very, very interesting, and the story itself is interesting, and it's like I said, if you look at it as a slasher, it's unlike any slasher I can think of. Um, and I see if you're defining the slasher as a revenge flick, a revenge horror movie, then this absolutely falls into that category. But it's not one that I think would, if you're talking about these types of tales, I don't know that this would automatically come to mind. But I think it should. I think everybody should read this if you're a horror fan. Um, and I'm gonna point out there is a lot of basketball in this book. There are a lot of, well, I mean, there aren't a huge amount of characters to begin with, but of the characters there are quite a few that play basketball. Um, so there are quite a few scenes of some basketball playing, and there's basketball talk, which is fun. I'm not a sports fan, but I had no problem with it, and it works in the story, and it works with the characters, and there's a basketball scene that's one of those tension building scenes. Um, so yeah, just a fascinating story. I try not to give anything away, so I'm trying to think if there's anything I need to tell you about the story, but I don't think so. I think, I mean, basically all you need to know, what it tells you on the cover flap is just this much. That's it. Well, okay, a little bit more up here, but that's more of a generalization. This is the story part, which is, again, 4 American Indians, an incident 10 years ago. Now the chickens are coming home to roost, as they say. Um, yeah, I don't want to give anything at all away. You need to read this. You need to go in. I may have said too much. You need to go in nice and cold and just take it all in. Absolutely fantastic. I gave it 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. I might even go as high as 5.5 out of 5. Once again, breaking the rules of mathematics. Just absolutely great. I'm not sure. I don't know if this needs to be Stephen Graham Jones' breakout book. If he hasn't already, I know he's known within the horror community. I'm not sure in the general reading public. So if he hasn't already broken out, this should be his breakout novel. Even non-horror fans should read this, as long as they're not squeamish. I do know, there's us horror fans that read horror all the time, love all kinds of different horror books. There are people who just dabble, and if they're going to dabble, they need to pick this up. I can't recommend it highly enough. Absolutely fantastic. A unique writing style, a very unique story. The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. 5.5 out of 5. Fantastic. And that's all I've got to say about that. So, if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Please be polite. If I was wrong about how I said Native Americans or Indians or American Indians, let me know. Again, don't want to offend anyone. And I'm not saying that in the, oh, it's politically correct, I don't want to be offensive kind of way. I genuinely don't want to offend anyone. So, comments, questions, corrections, comments below. Be polite. Please like, share, and subscribe. And that's it. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I've been your host, Eric Smith. And until next time, read more books.